Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kim Gage-Alexander. I'm one of the directors at Bethesda Green. We're a nonprofit organization based in Bethesda, Maryland. And thanks for joining us today for our environmental leader presentations. We've got a bunch of really great presentations coming up. All right, so a little bit of an overview about Bethesda Green. Bethesda Green, as I mentioned, is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Bethesda, Maryland. And we do many different things. And one of the programs that I run at Bethesda Green is our Environmental Leader Program. It is a school year-long internship with Bethesda Green, and the students do some technical work at the beginning where they learn some new skills. And then in the springtime, actually starting around November, December, we start doing some spring conservation projects where the students get to pick an environmental topic of their choice, and they go on to develop a project around that specific topic. And then after finishing the project, then we do presentations on the different types of projects that the students have done. And so the students are actually, this is their second to last week, and they're going to be done next Friday. So thanks for joining us for the presentations today. If you have any more questions or questions about the program, you can feel free to email me. Emily, if you could put a link to the webpage in the chat, that would be fantastic, along with my contact information. That would be great. All right, we're going to soldier on here. So as I mentioned, the Environmental Leader Program, if you wanted to learn more, the website's down at the bottom there, and we'll also be putting that in the chat for folks that are interested. The Environmental Leader Program is open for the fall, and we are starting to take applications. The link to apply is on the webpage. It's a SurveyMonkey link, and we can send that out to any folks that are interested. And thanks to our sponsors, Chesapeake Bay Trust, who helped fund all of these student projects, and also to Spring Power and Gas, who is one of our sponsors. Okay, so let's meet our leaders. So this is all of our leaders for this year. We're very excited to have them. Most of them are going off to college in the fall, and we're very excited. All of their colleges are listed on the webpage, along with their blog posts that they've written throughout the year, if you're interested in learning more about them. All right, we're going to start off with Alessandra. Alessandra is going to talk about her bat conservation project that she has been doing in Bethesda. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing, and Alessandra is going to share her screen. And each student's going to have 15 minutes to present their project, and then we'll do 5 minutes for questions. So if you do have any questions, I would encourage you to put them in the chat for now, and then we can read them to the students at the end. Hey, Alessandra, whenever you're ready to share your screen. And take yourself off mute. And away we go.
Hi everyone, my name is Alessandra, and my topic was bat conservation, my spring conservation project. I'd like to start off with a quote, just to set the tone of the presentation. This is from Mike Dalton, who's the executive director of Bat Conservation International. Bats lead us to the best opportunities to protect nature anywhere in the world. So my 2 goals for this project were 1, to build boxes, and 2, to spread awareness. So the boxes were supposed to create like makeshift habitats for bats because of many different factors, the habitats have been lost. And then the other main goal was to spread awareness of the problems affecting bats and how individuals can help. So the reason why I chose bats is because they consume pests as well as play an essential role in pollinating plants and dispersing seeds. So they're kind of like a mixture of bees and birds in that way, I guess, because bees pollinate and birds like spread seeds, and yeah, they're really important in ecosystems for those reasons. So this is an image of my project timeline that I had on Google Sheets. So there's 5 different phases, and I'll go into those more in depth in the next slides. So each of these phases corresponds with a month. So January was the initiation phase where I brainstormed and came up with the project idea and started planning it out. And then in February, I started doing some like initial research and conducted some interviews. And then in March was the planning phase. So that's when I planned the workshop and where I was going to place the boxes built during the workshop. And then April was the execution phase. So that's when the workshop was held. And then May is like finishing out the project, where I wrote a web page, or built a web page and wrote a blog post. And then June is the next steps for the project, where I'll be setting up the bat boxes and applying for the scientific research permit. So initiation. This is a picture of my initial brainstorm. And out of the three topics, I chose the native species one, and then the subtopic endangered species. So that's where the idea for bats and bat boxes came from. And then this is my initial outline. I have kind of like a less in-depth version of my timeline, I guess, because it's the same research, planning, execution, then the wrap up. But yeah, this is how I framed my timeline. And then I moved on to research, and then I chose a specific species in Maryland to focus on, which was the little brown bat. And the reason why I chose this one is because these bats are threatened and almost endangered in Maryland, because they've had just a lot of habitat loss and a couple other threats that I'll talk about. So just some quick facts. They're really small. They weigh very little. They're only 3 to 4 inches long, and that's surprising that they can live up to 34 years. And then they eat a lot of aquatic insects as well as mosquitoes, so it's always good. And then their color is brown, obviously, because they're called the little brown bat. Anyways, these are the main threats that affect the little brown bat as well as other bats, and that is the white nose syndrome, which is a disease spread through a fungus during hibernation. And then habitat loss due to urbanization and construction. And then artificial lighting can disrupt their behavior during night. And then wind turbines can disrupt their roots, their foraging roots. And then I conducted 2 interviews, the first of which was with Andy from the Chesapeake Wildlife Heritage. And she, as well as Jeffrey, answered questions on where to place bat boxes, how close they have to be to water sources, if bat boxes, the specific type of bat boxes that need to be built in order to encourage roosting in them, as well as do they have to roost with other bats. So these 2 people helped a lot with answering those questions on bat boxes in my project. And Jeffrey works with the Chesapeake Bay Trust. So after my research, I moved on to the planning phase. So here's the social media that I created for the bat box workshop. So I had a flyer, Twitter post or a tweet, and then Facebook post, and then an Instagram post as well. And then I planned a budget. So the only costs I was looking at for the project were the boxes, the poles on which to set the boxes, as well as the special permit use fee that was needed for the location where we would build the boxes, because we were planning on doing it in a public space. So all that together was about $450. And then my next step in this phase was figuring out where I was going to put the boxes once they were built. So there's a lot of different components that needed to be met in order to have bats roost in the boxes. And a couple of those were the most important ones I looked at were it has to be close, proximal to a water source, as well as a mixture of different habitats. And then it has to be in the sunlight. And so that allowed me to choose 3 different sites that I thought would be ideal. And these are all located in Rock Creek, which is like the biggest park in the area. And all these sites are very close to the Rock Creek watershed. So yeah, they are ideal. And then they're on a border of a forest as well, with like minimal human interference because they're not close to roads. Once I figured out the locations, that's when I started to work on planning the actual workshop. So I chose a park in Bethesda. I chose a time to advertise, and then I also chose the bat box to build before the workshop. Yeah, before the workshop, and then once that one turned out okay, we ordered more. Okay, so the workshop was held on April 9th, and then these are just some pictures from it. So we have me as well as a couple of students from my high school, and then you can see over on the left a picture of the bat box kits deconstructed, and then they're constructed on the right side. And so there's only a couple materials needed, just a hammer, a screwdriver, water, and then the liability and consent forms for those under 17, 18. And then the last phase in May was evaluating my project. So I met almost all my objectives except for setting up the boxes, and that will be done in the next steps in June. And then the metrics I had were having volunteers participating in the workshop, having a couple different locations, and obviously some of these metrics won't be like able to be determined if they're met yet, since the bat boxes aren't set up yet. So here are a couple of my obstacles and successes. One of the most important
I guess was receiving permission to use the park in time for the workshop. So we couldn't, my initial date was April 2nd, but we couldn't, we didn't have the permit, so we had to move it back a week. But it ended up being okay. We still had it in the public space and we still received the permit. So that was a success in the end. And then it was a bit of an obstacle to have enough people to sign up for the workshop, but we still got all the bat boxes set up, which was good. Yeah. And then I also built a web page that describes my project as well as the research, and it also helps us spread awareness by offering ways for people to help for bat conservation. So it kind of meets my spread awareness goal. And the blog post that I wrote is centered on the biggest threat to bats in North America, which is the white nose syndrome. So check that out if you'd like more information on that. And then these are the next steps that I plan on completing in June. So first, I wrote up like a maintenance monitoring plan, which will kind of outline how we will care for the boxes until they reach their end of their lifespan, which will be about 2 to 3 years. So it just has some information about how to monitor the boxes and how they will be maintained, and just some data sheets on how that process works. And then once I do a site visit with a representative from Montgomery Parks, then I'll set up the bat boxes and apply for a scientific research permit, which will allow me as well as other members of Bethesda Green to take data on the boxes, meaning like to monitor the boxes. And then of course, setting up the bat boxes, that will happen pretty soon in the next coming weeks. So that'll be really fun. And these are some of the people I contacted, as well as some of the people I worked with. And these are my references. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Alessandra. If you do have questions, I think we have a couple in the chat. I'm going to read them out to you, okay? And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your screen so we can have the next student get ready. So a couple questions for you. Are groups like BCI working on bat protection in Maryland to mitigate the broader threats they face in the area?
Well, I couldn't find a BCI chapter in Maryland, but I'm pretty sure they have like a Northeast chapter that works on those issues.
Okay, great. And do you encourage homeowners to put bat boxes in their yards the way they put up bird feeders?
Yeah, I think that'd be very helpful. But it is important to know that the bats might not roost in your the bat boxes in the yard, especially if there's a lot of traffic close by that house, if there's not a water source close by, as well as like if it doesn't get enough light. So it's very like bats are very picky, I guess. So, but it's a good idea to do it.
Next question, will you personally monitor the boxes after installation to see if they are used, or will we have to make plans for that when you're off to college? So you can explain a little bit more about the monitoring.
Yeah, for sure. So my plan was to do it maybe a little bit, but I definitely am going to college next year, so I won't be around to monitor them throughout their entire lifespan. So I think we were gonna have like a team, I guess, like a couple interns, maybe like summer interns, like work on monitoring them with like the data sheets that I created.
Okay. Fantastic. Thanks, Alessandra.
No worries.
All right. Fantastic. Up next, we have Parker Profit, who's going to talk about his offshore wind energy model. So Parker, I'm going to stop sharing and you can share your screen.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Parker Profit. I'm a senior at Whitman High School, and I'm also an intern here at Bethesda Green. And I made an offshore wind energy model for my spring conservation project. So here's a picture of my final model. I have it up behind me too. It's kind of hard to see, but I wanted to show a more close-up picture of what I made officially. So just to explain it really quickly, it's showing the process of the energy transfer from an offshore wind turbine to onshore to the greater electric grid. And this is just what my final model is. It's going to be going to museum next week, the Virginia Beach Surf and Rescue Museum. So yeah. So my objective when I started this project, I wanted to construct a model, presentation, and infographics to educate people on wind energy and just renewable energy in general, just because it was something I was interested in. I thought it was important, so I wanted other people to learn more about it. So why did I choose this project? I've always had a passion for engineering and renewable energy, so being able to combine those two things was important to me. I wanted to see, so I found wind energy, and I knew I was interested in wind energy. I wanted to make a model of that. When the idea of a model was kind of brought up to me, I thought that was really interesting. I wanted to make a model. I wanted to do wind energy, so I found this coastal Virginia offshore wind project to be perfect because it's local, or somewhat local. It's in Virginia. It's relevant and it's new. And a lot of these offshore wind turbines are new, and there's a lot of new projects coming up. So I wanted to kind of show that. So description about my project. I am making a model. I made a model, and I have educational pieces that go along with it that kind of explain like the general of wind energy, explain what the CVOW project is, explain my process of printing and construction and all of that. So yeah. So what is coastal Virginia and offshore wind? So currently it's being constructed offshore Virginia Beach. It's already been approved by BOEM, which approve all projects in federal waters, and it's owned by Dominion Energy. Currently there are 2 test turbines, which aren't like the greater electric grid, not a commercial project. It's It's just they're figuring out how to wire the cables out there, how all of it works out. So they bring constructed 27 miles offshore Virginia Beach and 15 more miles into the ocean. And the plan is to have 180 turbines to be completed by 2026. And that will be able to produce 8.8 million megawatts of clean renewable energy per year. And that is around enough to power up to 660,000 homes. So it's a really large scale project, and it has the capacity to power a lot of homes. So my timeline for this project, the first kind of month and a half, a lot of the first part was kind of figuring out what I was researching, what I was doing, what I was building, kind of understanding more about the project itself. And that's what that first phase was. Next, I was practicing using new software. So using SketchUp, what I was building my online model on. And then after I did that, designing my online model. Once I had my online model, it was finding materials so that way I could get the vision that I had in my head and online, and then put it together. And then finding a project location. So finding, I want my project to have an impact. I want people to be educated by my project. So finding a spot where that can happen. And then 3D printing. So after I had my location, materials, all of that, 3D printing was a big process because it was something I hadn't done before. It was getting those materials because I get the exact scale of what I wanted. And then construction and the educational pieces that happened after I had everything, after I had all my materials, everything 3D printed. I need to construct everything, put all my research together into educational pieces. So first was the research phase. I was looking for plans, dimensions, and project goals of CVOW, and also just looking just generally what it was. So I spent a lot of time on their website. I spent a lot of time on the Bowen website, which had all of like the legal documents. That had the research action plan, which I spent a lot of time looking at. It's a big, like, 100-page document that has all of the information about the project that you could ever think of. So that's where I was most of the time in this like first month of my project, just kind of looking at specifically how big it was to scale the wind turbine, how big it was, and how big it was to scale with other things. So that was a lot of the first part of my project. After I did that, I was practicing using SketchUp. The picture on the right is just it's just of my like kind of SketchUp homepage with some of the projects that I have at the bottom. So I wanted to create a realistic drawing online of what I was planning to build in person, but I didn't have the experience with SketchUp that I've had with other engineering software. I've used AutoCAD before, but I've never used SketchUp. So these few weeks were just kind of getting used to it, doing tutorials, understanding what I was doing on there. And yeah. And then once I was able to understand that, I spent a lot of time constructing the online model. And there was a lot of different like things that came into it. Like I was constructing, and I'm like, well, I want this to be exactly like the actual geography of the location. So I went on Google Earth and I looked for like where the trees were, where the lakes were. So that was like changing on SketchUp as I was going. I didn't have that originally, but then I needed to add it in. And yeah, so this is my final online model, and I put not identical to my physical model because it's not. There was a few changes that I had to make, like the animals that you see on this model, like I couldn't put in my physical model because I wanted to have them 3D printed. I wanted to have them at like a certain scale, but they were just so small in comparison to everything else that like the printer couldn't handle it. So that didn't end up happening on my physical model, but this is very close to what my physical model is. And yeah, so after I had that, I wanted to find materials. I wanted to find stuff that would that's the most realistic, that people can understand the most. So a lot of them were easy, like finding sand. It was just sand. Finding wiring was just wiring. And some of my models are 3D. I mean, some of my parts are 3D printed. The whole turbine is 3D printed. There was 6 separate pieces that I had to put together. The offshore substation and onshore substation are both 3D printed. But the other materials, finding how those work together was kind of important. So the hardest thing for me was finding finding what I should have for water. Like having water in a museum for a year is just, it's not really going to work. It's not going to be sustainable. So I ended up using foam, and I ended up painting foam and putting it in my model. And yeah, so finding a project location. I wanted to have my project end up somewhere where people would look at it and gain something from it. So I wanted to find, originally my goal was to find a museum, something related to energy, related to maritime, something that could be that'd be related to my project. So I made a list of a bunch of projects, a bunch of museums in Maryland and Virginia. And I found the Virginia Beach Surf and Rescue Museum. And this one had, it was a smaller museum, but it was related to like maritime history. And it's located right in Virginia Beach, right off the shore, or the project is right off the shore of this museum. So they also have a partnership with Virginians or Offshore Wind, which encompasses the CVOW project. So it kind of fit perfectly for what I wanted in a museum for my project to be. So yeah, after I had that location, I was working on my 3D printing, which I kind of touched on before. But this process was entirely new to me. I had never done it before. So I got a lot of help from my engineering teacher. He kind of showed me how to do it. He showed me how to get my model from what I had on my computer, get it on a website so it'd be ready to 3D print, and then get a flash drive in my computer and put it in the printer. And once I had that process like kind of nailed down, he let me do it on my own, and I was able to go in there before school and just kind of do it myself, put it in the printer, and then come back like an hour later when it's finished and pick it up. So it was definitely hard, and there was a lot of like trial and error with that. But once I was able to grasp it, it was really helpful to have the exact sizing of parts that I wanted, the exact parts that I wanted. So once I had all the materials, all of the 3D printing stuff, it was putting it all together. And this took a lot of like understanding how the parts work together. I spent a lot of time like seeing like how things would fit together, like seeing if a tree would fit, if I could just put it on top of the turf, if I drill a hole in the turf and put the tree in there, if I had to drill a hole in the turf and then put glue under it. Like there's a lot of different things that I had to see how they work together. So I made a whole practice model without my 3D prints, because I had pretty much extra of everything else but my 3D print. So I made a whole practice model. And then once I figured out how everything worked together, I made my final model. And then also a part of this process was making my educational pieces. That was just using the information that I had already curated from before in kind of the first phase of my project, and then putting it together where people could understand what it was and could actually gain something from it. So these are just some examples of my educational pieces. Kind of outlining just general about the project, about the wildlife impacts, about construction, about wind energy, just that stuff in general was shown on here. So this was my final physical model. It's kind of hard to put it next to me and show, so I took a picture of it so I could go through and explain it. So the main piece of this is the turbine, obviously, but there's also a lot of smaller parts that I wanted to explain. So the 3 red arrows on the bottom, those are the cables that connect the wind turbine to the offshore substation, which is the green arrow, to the onshore substation, which is the purple arrow. So those undersea cables are being constructed right now, and they're showing the energy transfer from they're transferring energy from the offshore and then to the greater electric grid through those 3 different parts. And then the blue arrow in the middle is pointing to kind of just, it looks like a block, but it's a scale break. So there's a 25-mile scale break there because it's so far offshore. My model doesn't show a bunch of empty ocean space that has like shipping lanes and other wildlife in it. It wasn't necessary to put in my model, so I have that scale break there. And then here's just more pictures of my model. I wanted to show it straight on, so that way you can get another angle of it, and then from the top just to show kind of how it looks from different angles. And yeah. So barriers and solutions. As I mentioned, I was completely new to the 3D printing process. I had no experience with it at all. So the first 2 prints like didn't really come out how I wanted them to. They were too small. One of them kind of like spiraled up into just a ball of like plastic. It wasn't really working how I wanted it to. And when I went to my engineering teacher for help, he helped me out a lot. So that was kind of how I got through that. And then changes with materials. There's a few times like I thought I knew exactly what I wanted, and then it just didn't work out. Like I had a certain type of yellow paint, and then I tried to paint it on my turbine, and it like wasn't thick enough. So I needed to go to the store and get some more like during like the end part of my project. So there was just some things like that, and just being able to adapt and be able to do that was kind of how I got through that. And then new software, I touched on that before too, but I'd never used SketchUp. And it was more of a challenge than I expected. I kind of thought, which was not very smart, but I thought going into it, because I've done AutoCAD before, because I've done some of this engineering software, I should be able to do this pretty easy. Not really. It was a little harder than I thought it was. So, I mean, doing those tutorials and stuff helped, and that's how I got through that. So, yeah. Metrics of success. The fact that I have a final model, how I wanted it to look is a big metric of success. The fact that I was able to 3D print stuff, and I've never been able to 3D print before and print 8 total pieces was success for me. And then also, like, I don't know how many visitors, but the museum will have visitors that will see and interact with that model. So that's really cool for me. Contacts and partners, Mr. Member, my engineering teacher, Chesapeake Bay Trust, who paid for it, Sammy Moore, who is the museum coordinator, and Brittany Woodson. I reached out to her for an interview, who actually we didn't end up happening, but I still put her here as a contact. And then future plans. So as I mentioned before, my model will be in the Virginia Beach Surf and Rescue Museum until May of 2023. And I'll continue to stay in touch with Bethesda Green in the museum to kind of see how my model is going along, see if it's staying up, if people are interacting with it, just all of that. So yeah, and then thank you. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you everybody for helping me with this. And yeah, if anybody has any questions.
And thanks to your dad, I heard he helped.
A little bit, yeah.
All right, questions for Parker, please put them in the chat. All right, so where are you going to college, and do you plan to study engineering?
Yes, I do. I'm going to NC State University, and I'll probably study mechanical engineering there. So.
Fantastic. What is the potential national impact of offshore wind energy? Offshore wind energy in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and providing energy. Is it a tool that can help reduce fossil fuels, or can it provide enough energy to replace fossil fuels altogether?
I think both. I mean, it's a clean energy source, so it's not having any carbon emissions, and also it is growing in the offshore kind of aspect of it. Since there's so much space offshore, and you can have a bunch of larger projects out there, so it has the ability to power, generate a lot of electricity out there and be a larger scale source of energy. So.
All right, fantastic. And next question, is it beneficial for is it only beneficial for coastal communities, or is it beneficial to communities that are inland as well?
I think it's more beneficial to coastal communities, but also a fact that I saw when I was going through this is 80% of America's population is near the coast. So even if it really is, I mean, the energy comes from offshore, so it's easier to get it to areas near that, but because it's the population is so dense near that, it will be serving most of the population.
Right, fantastic. So those 600,000 homes could be somewhere in Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Parker. Appreciate it. All right, next we are going to have Meg Graham, and Meg is going to present the book on habitat fragmentation and native landscapes in Montgomery County. So Meg, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you can share your screen.
So hello, my name is Meg Graham, and the title of my project is Habitat Fragmentation and Native Landscapes in Montgomery County. So overview of my project. So again, I did this as part
of my senior year, and it took about 6 months from beginning to end. And what I did during that time was create a physical booklet that would hopefully inspire people to plant more natives in their home gardens. And to do that, the booklet includes information about relevant issues, so habitat fragmentation and parcelization, and locations in the community where this occurs. I use this because it's a relevant example, so I thought it would bring it closer to the residents who would be reading this book. It then transitions to natives and how that can be a solution to habitat fragmentation. And I use a mocked up landscape model that I made to support this. Okay. So the first page just has a table of contents overviewing the book, and it also has an about the project, which basically goes over what I just explained in the overview. So this page talks about all the issues that relate to the project. I wanted to take a deeper dive so people could understand why planting natives was so important. And all the language that I use here is very simple, so the average reader could understand what I'm saying. So in this, I basically discuss habitat fragmentation and parcelization and their negative environmental impacts. These are two different concepts. Habitat fragmentation refers to when a bigger piece of habitat is split into smaller fragmented pieces, and habitat parcelization refers to when a larger habitat is split by different land use, but it may not necessarily be physically split. So I wanted to make sure that that difference was clear, so I explained that to the reader, and I also explained why I'll be referring to habitat fragmentation in the rest of my book. And I use here clear examples. You can see the monarch butterfly and the bobcat at the bottom. Both of these examples are local to Montgomery County or to the greater Maryland, so that it kind of brings it closer to home to the reader. So again, with the examples, I used mapping to show two places in Bethesda where habitat fragmentation was taking place. So you can see those images here show a before and after where a large area of the forest was cleared for development. I also have an analysis that goes into the environmental impact of clearing this land. It relates it back to the previous page, as well as taking it a little bit deeper and explaining the specific environmental impacts of these areas, almost as a case study. So here I transition to natives. I present it as a solution to habitat fragmentation. I understand that it is not the only solution, but the reason why I chose to focus on it for this project is because I feel like it is more approachable to the average reader, because the large scale conservation can be challenging and expensive. And this is something you can do kind of on any scale. So meaning the average homeowner can implement this in their own yards. And then on the right here, I give a list of the benefits of planting natives. I focus both on environmental benefits as well as benefits to the homeowner. So here is the landscape design that I was talking about. I created a landscape design that was based on native plants native to Maryland, so that readers could see how they could utilize native plants in their home gardens. So the design is a generic backyard design. And it is also broken down in the landscape tips into smaller, more manageable projects. So the reader can kind of take different aspects and use what applies to them in their home gardens. And you can also note that I don't draw attention to the grass. And that was a purposeful choice. Redoing your entire grass lawn can be very time consuming and expensive, and I didn't want that to be the focus of the project. It is addressed later, but here I just wanted to focus on the native plants. So that whole landscape design, as I said, was made thoughtfully using native Maryland plants, and that is highlighted here on this page. So each plant was taken from the landscape design and put on this page with the name, an image, a brief description, and the reason why it was chosen. So you can, I really wanted to include the reason why it was chosen because, again, every plant was chosen for a specific purpose. And this way readers can kind of see how native plants could benefit them in their yards. I feel like a weakness of other kind of booklets that kind of have the same topic that I was looking at is they just give a list of every type of native plant. And I feel like that is overwhelming to look at and doesn't benefit the reader because they don't know how to take those plants and then apply it in their own garden. So this way really puts a stress on the individual plant so that a reader can take that and then apply it in the same way to their gardens. Okay. And here is the kind of the closing, the wrap up of the book. As I said, I do talk about grasses a little later. I didn't want it to be the main highlight, but I did want it to be included. So here I'm talking about things like cutting back on maintenance, switching your grass to a more sustainable type of plant like clovers, or getting your lawn removed completely. As you can see, there's varying levels for the project. So people can kind of take what they want and apply it. But again, these are very big projects to undertake. So I didn't want it to be the main focus of the booklet. And I also addressed parcelization here. Again, it wasn't the main focus of the booklet, but I did want to say a little something that you could do, which is cooperation among landowners or talking to your neighbors. And then I also have the closing. This was very important to me because something that I find is lost in a booklet format is each page kind of feels separate to the rest of the booklet. So I wanted to make sure that every page kind of was brought together and that if you're reading it through, it makes sense. So the closing is kind of the final punch to bring all the points together. And I also have the acknowledgements because I wanted to thank everybody that helped me with this booklet. So I wanted to thank them at the end. And if you're wondering what the cover looks like, it looks like this kind of put together on the book. The front of it is very simple. So if it's sitting on the shelf, you know exactly what you're looking at. I didn't want it to be very complex because I thought that would confuse the meaning. And then I also have a little bit about me and my picture on the back. So the timeline. So this took, as I said, this was over a 6 month period where I was working anywhere from 3 to 6 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on what I was doing for the internship at that time. And in this time, I was doing anywhere from brainstorming to research, interviews, design, distribution, this presentation. And I also was able to take this booklet, which was the original way back when I was first researching and coming up with the project. I made this booklet and I was able to take this and turn it into the full thing. And what I think is really cool and something I wanted to highlight is I was able to keep some of the aspects that I had originally thought of, like this page, which really highlights the kind of pictures of the plant, which turned into this page. As you can see, the pictures are also highlighted here. So I thought that was really cool. Funding, most of this project to me was free. So, well, all of it was free to me, but I was able to use company accounts to make the booklet. So Canva is where I designed most of it. And I got images from both Canva and Shutterstock to put throughout. And SmartDraw is where I was able to create this landscape design. It was a free online software that's very easy to use. It kind of had all these shapes already in it that I was able to put in here and make a full design. And then each booklet we printed through Staples, and each booklet came out to be about $7. And this was part of, as I was nearing the end, I was able to go on their website and research all the types of printing they had and decide that this would be the best option for distribution. And then that they do a full service of printing and assembling. So that's great. Context, this is everybody who helped me throughout the project. So Matthew Kane, originally I was pursuing an interview with his colleagues, which didn't work out. So we were able to go down the route and he was able to provide me with reference material that was very helpful to my project. Jordan, Emily, and Kim all work for Bethesda Green. Sorry, Siri just popped up. Jordan, Emily, and Kim all work for Bethesda Green, and they were able to help me with the business side of it. And finally, Jonathan Kays, we were able to get an interview with him, which was great because he had a background in forestry. So he was able to provide a professional opinion on the project and I was able to see kind of a different view of it than I was reading and looking at in my research. So that was amazing. So problems and solutions, as I said, I had a little bit of a difficulty scheduling interviews, but I remained persistent and we pursued alternatives so that I was still able to get the information that I was looking for. Graphic design. So I'm new to graphic design and I've been working on it throughout this internship, but for this project specifically, I took time to kind of learn the basics, and I also improved it throughout based on suggestions from like my family and different things like that. And then I also kind of was struggling with the definition of personalization and fragmentation. I wanted to make sure I really understood it and I was able to then acknowledge it in the booklet and decide that I wanted to focus on fragmentation. So in the future, we plan on distributing at garden centers and nature centers. These are the locations where I feel like the booklet can be most beneficial. It'll also be on the Bethesda Green website under the interns page if you want to go read the full thing there and read more information and what is discussed in the booklet. And this also has the opportunity to scale depending on what we decide, how big we decide the final print will be. We can scale it up or scale it down. I also think that future translations and other property sizes, because this is a residential lot, we could focus on larger sizes, and booklets on other subjects would also be interesting. So measures of success, just getting the booklet printed and getting it made is amazing. When I was making it, it was a lot. I kept wanting to put more stuff in, so just having a physical copy is amazing. We're also, again, working on distribution, which would be really cool to kind of get it physically in spaces where people can use it instead of just being online. In the future, I was talking to Kim about this, but it would be a future opportunity for another environmental leader to kind of measure the effect. We talked about maybe putting a QR code in. That's not something I did, but it could be something in the future that would be really cool to kind of link it to the survey to see if people felt like it was inspiring. So conclusions, in the future, I think habitat space will continue to get smaller and smaller for organisms. So projects like this are going to become very important as we try to help in any way we can. As I said, large scale conservation projects can be extremely challenging and we might not have the budget or the space to do it. So taking a more individual or community-based approach, I think is very important, and that's what this book does. And I hope this project will continue to inspire people to plant natives in their home gardens. So thank you so much for listening.
Good job, Meg. All right. Wendy, loved your approach, particularly for those of us who are gardening challenged. I think you answered the question, where can I get a copy? We will be doing a run of Meg's book next week, so we'll let you know when the copies are available. Have garden centers agreed to display the book, and how many will be printed for distribution?
So I'm not really sure how many will be printed for distribution yet. We haven't thought of that. I definitely want to give everybody that's here a copy if they're interested. I haven't reached out to garden centers yet, but I've worked with ones in the past for other various projects. And I have a few in mind that are very community oriented and love doing stuff like this. So it's definitely something that would be able to happen.
Fantastic. Okay, Wendy definitely wants one. So Wendy, we will make sure that we let you know when they're available. Thanks, Meg. Appreciate it. Okay, next up, we have Alicia. Alicia, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you can start sharing yours.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. Hello, my name is Alicia, and I'm a sophomore at Holton Arms School, and I'm like super happy to be a part of Bethesda Green's Environmental Leaders Program and to have had the chance to work on this project. So for my spring project, I created a 6-episode podcast series about the circular economy, and the series outlines the problem with the current linear growth model, explains the key ideas behind the emerging vision of a circular economy, and talks about how we can set it in motion. And I had a lot of ideas for what I wanted my project to be at first, but this one stuck with me because 2 years ago, when I was really becoming interested in learning about emerging solutions to the threats of climate change and pollution, I took an online course about the circular economy offered by a Swedish university, and learning about the potential for change like this offered by this approach gave me a lot of hope for the future. And so the idea of the circular economy has so many different elements, and it can sometimes be a bit hard to understand it fully. So with the initial inspiration that I had 2 years ago, and kind of reading about it here now and then, I wanted to challenge myself to learn even more about this amazing topic. And the goal was to create an easy to follow resource for others, especially young people, to learn and get excited about the circular economy and seek to adopt its principles in their lives. Okay, so what does our world look like now, and why do we need a circular economy in the first place? So since the Industrial Revolution, our world has run on a linear model or linear economy, which can be best described in 4 words: take, make, use, toss. It's pretty much we take raw materials, we make something out of them, we use these products for a bit, and then finally we toss them away in the trash and they end up in a landfill or in the ocean. And so it's unsustainable because it leads to this huge amount of waste of valuable materials and relies on exploiting Earth's finite resources without allowing them the time to replenish. And so the big idea is that the linear economy is a key driver of biodiversity loss and climate change. So the circular model or circular economy is a bit harder to explain that quickly. So that's why there's the podcast. So there are 3 main principles of the circular economy that are defined by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They're really the people who got the circular economy more like in the news and like popular. So the principles are designing out waste and pollution, keeping materials in use, and regenerating nature. So to get a better sense of these, please listen to the podcast. But in a nutshell, the overarching goal is to, through purposeful design, stop waste from being created in the first place, and then keeping the items in use by sharing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, recycling, and all the other R's, existing materials and products to keep them in use for as long as possible, but they're suitable for being used. And this, reducing this waste and reducing the demand for production helps to regenerate nature. But to turn this vision into reality, we need to utilize innovative technologies and implement appropriate policies. So here are the 6 episodes that I made for the podcast. So in the introductory episode, I explain the problems with the linear model, which are mainly waste and pollution. And I kind of use a plastic model as an example throughout. So I outlined the 3 pillars of sustainability to show how and why the linear economy is unsustainable. And then towards the end, I introduced the circular economy as an emerging solution to these issues. In my second episode, I discussed the critical role of purposeful design of products themselves and kind of the processes surrounding each stage of their life cycle, because it is really design that determines the environmental impacts of a product. And I also discussed the sustainable cradle-to-cradle idea, and I used a cell phone as an example throughout the episode. In my third episode, I explained the importance of ensuring that resources are continually in use in something that's called a closed loop product in the technical cycle of the circular economy. And I also presented a number of up-and-coming approaches that individuals and companies can take to support keeping materials in use. In the fourth episode, I discussed the biological cycle of the circular economy, so sort of like those organic compounds, I introduced the problematic impacts of conventional agriculture and food waste on climate change and biodiversity loss. And I talked about regenerative agriculture is and how we can leverage it to benefit natural systems. In my 5th episode, this is probably my favorite episode, I discussed the importance of scientific and technological advances in adopting the circular economy. And so I looked at some existing and emerging technologies that can be leveraged to achieve circularity. And so some of these were 3D printing, artificial intelligence, bio-based materials, organic electronics, and waste to energy schemes. In the final episode, I touched on the barriers to implementing the circular economy, and I described the approaches that can be taken by like governments, companies, and consumers to overcome these challenges collaboratively. And I introduced the principles of a circular city and talked about what some cities are already doing to become more circular. So I had like the amazing experience of interviewing so many amazing experts who brought the podcast to life and who I personally learned so much from. And I really want to thank Bethesda Green's Be Green Business Director, Patty Simonton, for helping me arrange these interviews. And so these interviews were great, like to get to know the expert and hear about the passion they have for sustainability and the circular economy within their respective fields. So the fantastic experts who I interviewed were Dr. Diana Watts, Miss Vanessa Barboni-Halik, Mr. Matthias Arnault, Mr. Ranji Kali-Vertanos, Mr. Michael Protis, Miss Charlotte Henderson, Miss Julia Davey, Dr. Margaret Kocherga, and Miss Emily Yates. And so what they do is listed on the slide. And so through these interviews, I generally learned about the role of young people in the economy, how products can be designed to be more sustainable across the board, how we can transform waste into new amazing products, how regenerative agriculture benefits natural systems, how innovations like 3D printed NFTs, which are in the news now a lot, and organic electronics can help to make a more sustainable world, and the role of cities in the circular economy, and much, much more. So here is my project timeline. It was really packed. It wasn't really super like ordered, a lot of things going on at once, but my main tasks over the past few months have been doing lots of research to write general scripts for each episode, reaching out for interviews, writing interview questions, of course, conducting the interviews, and recording and editing all of my episodes. And I had to plan accordingly to meet each of these deadlines that I imposed on myself for each of these steps. Okay, so I used a microphone and an online voice recorder to record my podcast, of course, and I organized the recording files in folders on my computer. I did my interviews through Zoom and used a program called Descript to get a transcript of each of the interviews to select the sound bites that I wanted to use in the final version of each episode. And I used Canva to make my podcast icon and to design this presentation. And Jordan Lee, who is the communications associate at Bethesda Green, she created a web page with my project based on a document that I made with the information that I wanted on there. And so with funding, I didn't actually need any additional funding from Bethesda Green and partners. I just got a lot of support, which is kind of priceless in and of itself. So some of the challenges that I had was, it was first a bit challenging to get interviews. I did a lot of cold emailing to people, but I didn't get a lot of responses. So Kim recommended that I reach out to Patty, and with her help, I was able to get an interview for every episode, which I really wasn't expecting, and which was really amazing. Another challenge that I faced was that after the first episode, my microphone decided to stop syncing with Anchor, which is the podcasting software. So I had to find a new way to record my podcast. And it actually turned out to be a good thing because through the program, I was able to save the audio computers on my computer directly instead of through Anchor. So I would have always had them in case something didn't save on Anchor. So yeah, overall, I learned how to use a lot of new programs in the project. And then with publishing episodes, there was some issues with the emailing because you can't just click publish. There has to be lots of confirmation and all of that. But it did work out. The podcast is, of course, published. And yeah, so the project taught me a lot of valuable skills. I initially, going into it, I had an idea of what I wanted to discuss in the series. So I determined the episode topics kind of quickly. That was, of course, the easiest part. And I had to conduct a lot of research about each topic for each specific episode and writing out kind of like a script and what I wanted to say, and then reworking and kind of making it perfect for each episode was really a challenge, but I really enjoyed doing it. And then, of course, determining how to organize the information to kind of have a logical flow in each episode, and also writing to have the tone be kind of engaging in a podcast setting, not like an English essay. Because my goal was to explain kind of complex concepts, including those in STEM in my 5th episode in an easy to understand way. So I really wanted to describe things in depth with examples. And so apart from communicating with the audience, I also engaged with experts through emailing questions and conversations during interviews. And since the project was a few months long, 5 months long, 6 months long, I learned how to organize like my time for creating each step of an episode, from writing, interviewing, editing, recording, and creating the web page, content, graphics, and all of that. So I'm really happy that I was able to get it all done. And overall, the experience really improved my research, communication, writing, and time management skills. So really great experience. So in terms of metrics, I created 6 episodes for the series, and in total, the podcast has 3 hours of content. And of course, I had the chance to interview 9 amazing experts. And unfortunately, I was really working on everything until the last minute. So I published quite recently, so of course there aren't as many listeners as I may have wanted, but this is definitely a metric that I'll use in the future. And outreach, I'm planning to use a few different methods. Probably the biggest way to get listeners would be to reach out to my school to share the podcast through maybe like a highlight article, or just emailing the link out to teachers and students, or maybe the environmental club. And the other main way would be to get promotion from Bethesda Green social media, and of course my own personal social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, and blog to promote the project. So that's all about the project. I would like to give some thank yous. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank Kim, the Environmental Leaders Program Director, for guiding and checking in with me throughout the entire process of creating a successful project and giving me lots of feedback along the way. Thank you again to Patty for helping me secure interviews with such amazing experts. Thank you for Jordan for creating a fabulous web page for my project, which I'll be putting in the chat, the link to it. And then thank you for Emily for helping me publish my podcast across different platforms. And then finally, of course, I'd like to thank all of the experts who I got the chance to interview for taking the time to speak with me for this project. So yeah, you can't click on the links here on the slideshow, but I will put the link to the chat to the webpage that Jordan made. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alicia. All right, some questions for you. All right, are you optimistic that a switch to a circular economy is possible and that businesses can be as profitable switching their business models to be more circular?
Yeah, so this I really discussed in like my last 2 episodes. I'm really optimistic, especially on like the tech and science side. There's so many amazing technologies that are being leveraged and have the potential to be leveraged. And of course, business and kind of government policy is really important to advance that. And I talk about that in my 6th episode, what sorts of policies businesses and governments can implement. And really the big one is collaboration, kind of reaching out across different parts of, like, for example, a product life cycle to really make the entire life cycle as sustainable as possible. So yeah, I am very optimistic.
Right. Do you think you will use this new skill of podcasting in college and beyond to communicate the need to protect the environment?
Yeah, definitely. As I said, the podcast really improved my communication and like messaging skills, how to really get a message across in an easy to understand way so it's not overwhelming, so that people actually want to listen to. And yeah, podcasting is definitely a new tool that I enjoyed learning about for messaging. So yes, I probably will continue that and also do blogs. So yeah, definitely enjoyed expanding my communication skills.
Thanks. And the next question was, great presentation. Do you see yourself continuing the podcast in the future? So I think you have already answered that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe in high school, if I can continue, but yeah.
Yeah.
All
right. Thanks, Alicia. Right. Next up, we have Rocky. Rocky's going to talk to us about the video series that he created. So Rocky, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you can start sharing yours.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so my project was creating a video series on energy production. So the objective of my project was just to create short, informative, and entertaining videos that would educate viewers about environmental topics. So why this project? So when I was first thinking about what project I wanted to do, similar to Parker, my preference was renewable energy, because renewable energy is something that it interested me for a long time. In school, when I do projects, oftentimes I focus on renewable energy. I thought, why not expand this a little bit more to this project? So, okay, so how does my project help? My project helps visual learners and it's accessible to a diverse audience. So when I was researching my project, when I was researching videos about renewable energy to learn more, one thing I noticed was that a lot of the videos were not the most entertaining. Or, I mean, obviously, when it's about a topic like renewable energy, it's not going to be the most entertaining thing, but they're like pretty boring, I'd say, pretty bland, and just like, talking like deadpan about renewable energy. So I thought, why not make videos that are going to entertain the audience and also teach them about renewable energy? And then the other focus was how it would directly relate to your life, no matter what background or diverse, you're from, whether you're like the richest person in the world or, not as rich, no matter what, renewable energy is going to affect you and stuff like that. Okay, so this is a rough outline of my timeline. So, throughout January and February, I started drafting, recording my first episode, and then February through May was my second episode, and that I'll talk about later, why it was such a long time. My third episode was March through April, and then on March 16th, this Zoom interview was for episode 2. For my fourth episode, I worked on that from April through May. Okay, and then these are my 4 episodes. Funny picture of me here, but so episode 1 was fossil fuels, episode 2 was community solar, episode 3 was about geothermal power, and then episode 4 is about hydropower. Okay, so before I go into like the specifics of my projects and how exactly I went about making each of these videos, I just wanted to show the final product so you could get an idea about what it actually is, and then I will go into how. Okay, so I'm just going to show a short part of this video. I'm not going to show the whole thing.
Hey, I thought this was in paper. Why are literal solar energy, wind energy, and fossil fuels here? Yeah, but today's debate topic was the future of energy. So some of us energy sources decided to show up. Oh, okay. I don't know if this is real or not, so I'll just go along with it, I guess. Let's introduce ourselves to get acquainted. My name is Wind. Some of my hobbies include whistling, spinning, and chilling with the homies. It just makes me sad to see the earth getting warmer. All right, I'll go next. My name is Rocky, and apart from having trippy dreams, I like to play basketball and promote environmental causes. Crazy what your mind can come up with, huh, Rocky? Anyways, my name is Solar, and I like to sunbathe all day long. My name is Cole. I like to ruin the environment and cause people respiratory problems. So, wait, that's it, Cole? Hi, guys. I'm Oil, and I also like to ruin the environment and cause people respiratory problems. But on top of that, I love being spilled in large bodies of water. Like, don't even get me started on that. It is such a good feeling. In fact, 1 gallon of oil can contaminate 264,000 gallons of water. Okay, Oil, but when coal is burned, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxides, carbon dioxides, mercury, and so many other gases are released. This causes short and long-term respiratory problems for humans and can also exacerbate asthma. And not only does it do that, it also increases healthcare costs. Yeah, but burning oil releases all those gases too. Also, oil is the most used form of energy generation in the world. There's no competing with that. The amount of methane released by coal mines is unmatched, and methane is about 25 times more powerful than carbon dioxide when it comes to warming the planet. In fact, just take the year 2010, for example. In 2010, 125 billion cubic meters of methane were released into the atmosphere from working underground in surface coal mines. Man, if you want, we can just fight right now. Nope, don't.
Okay, I'll stop it there. So as you can see, the situation in that video escalated pretty quickly. So basically the premise of that video was that was the first episode about fossil fuels. It was to create like an entertaining scene where, you know, they were talking about the bad impacts they have on the environment, but obviously they were competing on who was worse. So not only did you learn about, you know, the bad effects of coal and oil, but you also got to see a little bit of a fight or a debate, I guess, because that was the debate club. But okay. So back to the presentation. So the process for creating each video basically entailed 7 steps. So the first was researching. The second was drafting the video details. And then after that, I had to draft the script. And then I finalized the script. And then I shot the video, edited the video, and then created social media content to, you know. Okay. So during the research phase, I had to make sure to use reputable sites, you know, universities, databases, government agency sites, stuff like that. And then one thing about my research was I always tried to make sure to relate it to Montgomery County or Maryland, just so I knew how this topic would relate to Montgomery County, Maryland. Obviously, Bethesda Green is based in Maryland, so it's important to relate it to that. And also just because most of the, you know, viewers and people that are going to see Bethesda Green are in Maryland. Okay, so next I had to draft the video details. So before getting to writing the script, obviously I had to ask myself certain questions. Where am I going to shoot the video? What's the context of the video going to be? The storyline, what role are each of the characters going to play? What materials, costumes, what are those that I'm going to need? And then where can I get these materials? And I also wanted to highlight that there was no money or funding needed for this project. I didn't really have to buy materials. I'll go into that later too, but yeah, so no money. Okay, so the steps 3 and 4 were drafting and finalizing the script. Once I had the video details down, you know, thinking about the context and the, you know, the characters and the role they're going to play, I had to actually write the script. I had to think about a good balance of fun and informative while writing the script. And then once I had my draft for my script, I was able to, you know, go over it with Kim, and then we would make appropriate changes and edits to make the script as good as it could be. And then I would be prepared to shoot the video. And then for the second episode was a little bit different. That was the episode about community solar. I did not do a skit. Instead, I interviewed a representative of Neighborhood Sun named Tom Smith. And so that was a different video. So yeah, that was a different process. Okay, so for shooting the video, I combined, you know, I was able to use the iPhone tripod that Patty Simonton and Alex Spiegel both helped me borrow. So that's what I did for the episodes. And for shooting the video, for the first 3 videos, I had to do the shooting all by myself. I didn't have someone to help me. And then for the fourth video, I got my sister to help me for that one. I did moving shots, so that one was a little bit more of a creative video. So I thought, switch it up a little bit. And then for the locations, well, I just used outside my house, the Bethesda Green office. I used that one for episode 3 about geothermal, where the setting was like in a school sort of. So the office setting was similar enough to that. And then outside the Card Rock Club, which is just like a local swim and dive club with like trees and stuff. So that was good. Okay, so editing the video, I edited my videos using iMovie. So yeah, so some of the things I did were I made captions, so you can see on this picture right here. Oops, you can see on this picture right here. It says wind under the wind energy because just to make it clear that that's wind. I also edited the volume so that it was consistent throughout each video and it wasn't going like because when you record sometimes the volume differs. And then I also used transitions like cross dissolve and cross blur and other ones like that just to make the video more smooth and aesthetic. And then the last step was creating social media content. So what I did was I just modeled my social media posts after the blog post that we did. The social media for the blog posts, I used Canva and I made Instagram posts. So I tried to make flashy headlines like coal and oil could control and spoil our future. Just little phrases like that to hopefully pique the interest of people seeing it on Instagram. And then also, I didn't only just do like these front covers, I also had other slides on Instagram. You can like slide it so people could get information from that in case they didn't even watch the video or didn't have time or just wanted more information. So yeah. And so now I'm going to talk about the barriers that I faced throughout the process and how I addressed them. So the first barrier was that I needed an iPhone holder and a tripod to shoot the video itself, because going into this, I had my phone, but I didn't really have a tripod. So what I did is I reached out to colleagues, and both Patty and Alex at Bethesda Green helped me. They let me borrow their tripods. Patty had an iPhone holder and Alex had a tripod. So I like sort of combined those, and then I was able to shoot the videos. So the second barrier is it was challenging to schedule a visit to the community solar site. And so that's still ongoing. So my episode 2 is still ongoing. Like my first episode, 3rd and 4th are all ready to go. My second episode is still in the works. I'm mostly done with that. I just need to get some B-roll at the community solar site, and me and Kim have that scheduled for next week. So once I'm able to do that, that'll clear up that barrier. And then the third one was just recording the videos by myself was pretty tough sometimes. I had to set up the tripod. I had to, walk around. I had to make sure the camera was facing the right way. When you're recording yourself, it's a lot harder than having someone just record for you. So that also limited like the types of shots I could take. I couldn't take moving shots for my 4th episode I did, but for the other ones, I couldn't really take moving shots and stuff like that. So I just had to make the best of the situation and think outside the box on how I'm going to record and how I'm going to keep the video going. Because obviously, like if you just have one shot, still it's not going to be engaging to the audience. So I just did my best to do a variety of shots in different ways that I could. Okay, so measures of success. So here are some of the social media measures that Jordan sent me. So you can see that one of the Instagram posts that she had got 19 likes, 22 accounts engaged. This is as of yesterday, and she posted it 2 days ago, I think. So after one day, like 164 accounts reached. And you can also see like Twitter and Facebook statistics, similar, 36 impressions, 23 impressions. Okay, so yeah. So these are going to be ongoing too. And hopefully all the numbers will increase. And then the other measures of success were I created a post-video survey that's in the caption of each video on YouTube. And that will be filled out on SurveyMonkey. I haven't gotten the chance to see the results of that yet, but that's another measure of success. And then there's also going to be video metrics that I haven't got a chance to see either, but I'll be able to look at, the average viewing time, the, amount of people that's viewed it, the amount of likes. I think Jordan posted it yesterday and it's gotten around 15 views till today. So 15 in a day, I guess that's pretty good. And that'll hopefully increase because these videos are always going to be online. And yeah, as my episodes release, I'll hopefully get more and more views and more people will watch it. So yeah, and then the last measure of success was just the fact that I was able to create 4 total episodes despite the certain limitations that come with, like COVID, working with organizations that makes things slower, the limitations. So yeah. And then some of the contacts and partners that I had. So Neighborhood Sun for episode 2, they're obviously very key to that. Tom Smith, the Chief Revenue Officer at Neighborhood Sun, he was the one who interviewed with me on my 2nd episode and helped that one be good. And then Alex Spiegel and Patty Simonson, they were the ones that helped me borrow the tripod and iPhone holder so I could actually shoot the videos. So that was important. Chesapeake Bay Trust for their support. And then Larry, I'm not sure what his last name is. He's pretty informal. But he is the owner of the Carter Rock Club, Swim and Dive Club. And he was the one who gave me permission to shoot on the Carter Rock, shoot my video on the Carter Rock grounds. So thank you to him. And then in the future, I can always help with future productions. My personal video production skills have increased a lot, especially with, shooting it by myself, editing by myself. And it's made me a more independent person and more knowledgeable of apps like iMovie. And then also by working with Neighborhood Sun, hopefully Bethesda Green's connection with Neighborhood Sun is strengthened, and this can help with future collaborations and endeavors that Bethesda Green and Neighborhood Sun might want to do in the future. And then lastly, I just wanted to give a thank you to the people that supported me. So Kim, Emily, Jordan, Patty, Alex from Bethesda Green, and then Miss Mara Fasos from Whitman. She's the internship coordinator and helped me get this internship and, provide me with some advice throughout. And then Neighborhood Sun, Tom and Emily Tokarowski, she helped me coordinate the interview with Tom. And then Tom, took the time out of his day, did the interview with me, was really helpful. So definitely once I get episode 2 up, that would be a good one to check out if you want to learn about community solar. And then Chesapeake Bay Trust.
Thanks, Rocky. I'm going to have you stop sharing your screen. Any questions for Rocky? Please feel free to put them in the chat. And we're going to gear up for our last presentation of the day. I'm going to share my screen. Any questions for Rocky? And Rocky, I know that if you wanted to throw the Bethesda Green YouTube link in the chat so that folks can view your video, that would be great. So any other questions for Rocky at this time? Thanks, Rocky, for throwing that link in the chat so folks can have a look. And that we're going to be getting the rest of your videos up in the meantime, so folks can check back in a few days. Other than metrics and impressions, have you received feedback from the people who have watched the videos?
Yeah, so for that one, I have the post video survey that is in the captions of my videos, and I haven't had a chance to see the results of that yet. I'm gonna have to go through the process of logging into SurveyMonkey and all that. But once I'm able to do that, I'll be able to see their, I made it was 2 questions long. So it's keeps up the, short video, short survey. It's really easy. It takes 10 seconds to fill out. It's just basic question. I think it was would you recommend this to another person? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how engaging did you find this? So I'll be able to see that, and then I'll be able to gauge the impressions from there.
Okay. And the next question was, are we going to be posting them on TikTok? And the answer is, I believe that we are not, because Bethesda Green does not have a TikTok account yet. Correct, I'm assuming, yes. Okay. All right, great. Thanks for those questions. And for our final presentation of the day, we've got 2 students. We have Alex and Andrew, who are going to talk about their carbon garden. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Alex, I'm going to have you start sharing yours.
Okay. Hi, I'm Alex Spiegel, an intern at Bethesda Green, a senior at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, and a Somerset resident.
I'm Andrew Leibowitz, and I have all the same credentials as Alex. And this is the carbon garden. Let's begin with carbon and its importance here on Earth. Life on Earth is considered carbon-based because every single living thing is made up of carbon. Carbon is not only vital for life, but also the abiotic factors that allow life to thrive. Carbon is cycled through the biosphere, the slim layer on Earth where we live and where most life is found, the pedosphere, the layer on Earth where soil is found, the geosphere, way down beneath us where rocks are present, the hydrosphere in the oceans and any water body. Carbon is also significant in the water cycle, and the atmosphere, the air we breathe in. So carbon is everywhere, but as I'm sure we all know, we have created an imbalance of it in our atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels. And this, of course, has contributed to global warming, which is set to have tremendous consequences on the well-being of our planet. Now, there are a variety of different methods to help cool down the Earth. These remedies involve either the reflection of light back into space or capturing CO2 from the atmosphere. We can capture carbon naturally through soil carbon sequestration, reforestation, or the use of biochar, which we will discuss later. But then there are also these new fancy technologies being developed to artificially sequester carbon. Looking at the graphic to the right, though, we can see how great carbon sequestration is. The y-axis displays relative price, and the x-axis displays potential carbon storage for different methods of reducing climate change. Being alone in the bottom right corner, we can see how cheap and effective soil carbon sequestration is. And we see these other new techniques such as direct air capture, bioenergy carbon capture, or enhanced weathering. And while they can sequester large amounts of carbon from the atmosphere, they come at such a large price and are only useful for the purpose of taking in carbon. On the other hand, soil carbon sequestration provides numerous other positives, as it makes soils healthier, giving agricultural benefits. It promotes biodiversity. It reduces land erosion, runoff, and water pollution. Soil stores 3 times more carbon than that which exists in the atmosphere, and 4 times more carbon than that in living plants and animals. So if practiced on a large scale, soil carbon sequestration really has the potential to make a difference against climate change. So what exactly is carbon sequestration? Terrestrial carbon sequestration is defined as the process of capturing and storing carbon dioxide in soil or plant biomass. That is, taking carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it into plants and soil. It occurs in different ways, and there are a multitude of factors that impact the process. Alex created the image to the right, which models the knowledge I will discuss. It all starts with photosynthesis. Essentially, plants take in carbon dioxide and water and produce carbohydrates. This becomes energy for the plant, allowing it to grow, as well as perform root exudation, which I will talk about in a little bit. So a large part of plant biomass makeup is carbon. Thus, we can say that plants temporarily sequester carbon until death. That is one of the basic ways carbon sequestration occurs. But another way it happens is through the decomposition of organic matter. When that apple falls off the tree, it slowly becomes a part of the soil beneath it as it is decomposed by insects and microbes. The decomposition of any organic matter introduces carbon into soil, where it is stored as SOC, or soil organic carbon. From there, carbon will either be respirated back into the atmosphere by microbes, or can be retained in the soil for thousands of years in the humus. When we talk about carbon sequestration as a means for meaningfully reducing CO2 levels, we aim for long-term storage, so we really value the humus. So now we've talked about how carbon from biomass is cycled into soil. Now let's get into root exudation. Around 40% of carbon that plants absorb is actually used as exudates. Exudates are a fluid made of carbohydrates that the plant shoots out through its roots. This fluid attracts beneficial microbes. This moves us to the next topic of mycorrhizal fungi. Mycorrhizal fungi have symbiotic relationships with nearly 95% of plants. Life on land likely wouldn't exist if not for them. So Basically, plants allow the mycorrhizal fungi to infect their roots, and the fungi are happy to do so. They colonize plant roots and create a sort of trading hub in the plant roots. Mycorrhizal root networks, known as mycelia, cover 700 times more soil than plant root networks do. They also extend much deeper in the soil. Because of this, the mycorrhizal fungi is able to increase the gathering capacity of plant roots. The fungi provides the plant with water and key nutrients that the plant has limited access to without, and in return gets these carbon-rich exudates. This leads to another form of carbon sequestration, where the mycorrhizal fungi stores carbon within the mycelial network. In addition, they also produce a sticky substance called glomalin that converts to humus and allows for the preservation of soil carbon. So mycorrhizal fungi are massively beneficial for both plant health and carbon sequestration.
Okay, so now we'll move on to how we applied all the information that Andrew shared to our project. So what is a carbon garden? A carbon garden is a planted area that aims to collect and store as much carbon as possible given the size of the planted space. Carbon gardens store carbon within the soil and plant biomass. Carbon gardens will look very different depending on the biome or region they're planted in. Another important feature of carbon gardens is that they can have similar benefits as other gardens, such as pollinator or rain gardens. So, some of the techniques we're using in our garden include reducing soil disruption. Soil disruption is any plowing, tilling, or soil movement that releases carbon back into the atmosphere. Plowing, rototilling, or even digging with a spade exposes soil microorganisms to excess oxygen and sunlight, accelerating the loss of stored carbon. We plan to minimize soil disruption because it would be impossible to completely avoid it. We also plan to use replacements for inorganic fertilizers. Inorganic fertilizers contain only a few nutrients, which usually include nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, and sometimes other micronutrients. This is extremely problematic because bacterial populations in the soil will rapidly spike when a concentrated source of nitrogen is supplied into the soil. The rapidly growing populations will eventually eat all of the nitrogen, which forces them to use the humus as their main source. And over time, this leads to a dramatic reduction of the amount of carbon in soil. So some of the replacements we're looking at are compost, mulch, biosolids, and biochar. So the application of biosolids or compost boosts soil health by adding organic material and nitrogen, while reducing the need for synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. In addition, nitrogen is released much more slowly instead of a rapid pace. Also, extra organic matter helps hold water in the soil and can supply other nutrients that increase plant growth. Biochar is produced from burning organic materials such as grass and timber at high temperatures with little to no oxygen availability. Biochar is very useful for absorbing nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon within the soil. It also helps retain nutrients provided by the compost. Biochar can also increase water holding capacity and thereby reducing water and nutrient leaching. Next, some of the other techniques we're using are growing native and perennial plants. As you can see to the right, these are the 6 plants we've selected for our garden, and 3 of them are shrubs. So that's the silky dogwood, the sweet fern, and the black chokeberry, and 3 native grasses, which are the eastern bottlebrush grass, Indian wood oats, and Pennsylvania sedge. Perennial plants live for 3 or more growing seasons, so they require less maintenance than annual plants. They will grow back each year from their roots, which go dormant in the winter. Perennials put their energy into growing strong roots, unlike annuals. As you can see in this image to the left, on the right we have perennial plants, and on the left we have an annual plant. The roots are much longer and deeper in the perennial plant than in the annual plant. Perennials' long roots allow them to hold onto moisture and carbon, making the soil healthier even during extreme weather. It's important to know that deeper roots will store carbon more effectively. Perennials don't leave soil barren, therefore the soil is less susceptible to disruption. There's also no need to disrupt the soil once perennials are planted, which allows them to develop strong relations with the mycorrhizal fungi. The plants that will be most effective in sequestering carbon are those that grow large and live long. Native plants are suited for the specific area's growing conditions, so they will require less maintenance and will have a higher survival rate. So here's a look at how the Somerset Carbon Gardens ecosystem. So one of the main features we're looking to include is multi-story cropping. As you can see in the illustration here, multi-story cropping is the layering of plants at different heights. Multi-story cropping will allow for the maximum amount of space to be used for plant growth, which also allows for the highest rates of net primary productivity. Multi-story cropping essentially mimics a forest, which is one of the best natural resources or sources for sequestering carbon. Here is a screenshot of a 2D model I created to show the location of the carbon garden. It is located in Somerset in the forested area next to Dorset and Wisconsin Avenue. This is a closer look at the site, and it shows the current trees and shrubs that are being grown in the area. All of the plantings there are young and have only been planted in recent years. The garden is a fairly spacious area, about just over 1,500 square feet. We had 3 main requirements for our site selection. These requirements included that it had to be near the Bethesda Chevy Chase area, easily accessible to pedestrians, and have suitable growing conditions. These conditions included adequate light, adequate space, and it had to be unpolluted. So that's how we came to the selection of the Somerset site. As you can see in the picture of the top right, there's plenty of space, and really there's space to grow, which is very important.
Okay, some obstacles that we encountered during the project was working in a group with limited in-person contact. So this whole internship and the duration of this project has been virtual. So that has definitely put a spike in the way we communicate and the amount of time we've had. But we did overcome it. Alex and I texted and called a lot, along with the meetings that we had weekly. Using SketchUp for the first time, neither Alex and I had ever used any sort of modeling service before, so we really had to do a lot of learning with tutorials and experimenting. Setting up interviews with experts first. We had to find who we wanted to interview, who were experts in the subjects we wanted to learn more about. And another part of that obstacle was actually physically reaching out to them. But we had a lot of assistance from Kim and this contacting. And we did a lot of research on the people that we interviewed. And finding a suitable site was probably the biggest obstacle we encountered, because it took us a very long time to come across Somerset. We browsed other areas. And then once we actually decided on Somerset, it took us maybe a month or two to actually secure the location through the town of Somerset.
So here's a image of our plant budget. So as you can see, these are the 6 plants we've selected, and we're looking at native nurseries around the area. So our total cost of plants is likely to be around $390.
And this is the other part of the budget, including not the plants. So mycorrhizal fungi spores to induce that great relationship that I talked about earlier. You can actually just apply it to seeds or roots if there's not enough naturally. mulch to prevent a large population of weeds, keep in water and nutrients, compost, which we're planning on using unsulfured blackstrap molasses, which is an extra carbohydrate that you can add to compost to feed microbes, so that will spike microbial populations, along with biochar, which naturally sequesters carbon. And we just ordered a soil test, so we're going to test the soil. And then in terms of gardening equipment, Alex and I have that, and rain barrels, just to supply water to the site. And
Okay, so our project consists of 5 phases. In our first phase, we selected a project idea, which was the carbon garden, and we had to begin researching it and the topics that it involved, such as carbon sequestration. So in our second phase, we developed educational aspects of the project, got necessary approval, and began designing our garden, which we showed through like the 2D SketchUp model. In our third phase, we tracked engagement with our survey that we sent to Somerset residents, finalized our educational aspects, and finalized our budget. And during this phase, we will also begin construction. In our fourth phase, we will take care of the garden maintenance. In our fifth phase, we will put a monitoring and maintenance plan into action. So we're looking to have volunteers that we can help, that we can kind of teach to continue taking care of it when Andrew and I are gone.
So these are some of the educational aspects Alex and I have created. There was a flyer that we sent out to Somerset residents, and you can take a minute to look at that, as well as the welcome sign, which will be posted at the garden. And we have a web page at the link below. If you want to take a minute to scan the survey, Alex and I would appreciate that. But just take a minute to indulge in these signs that we've created.
I'll give another 10 seconds if anybody needs to scan the survey QR code.
And these are survey responses. So Alex and I were happy to see that we had overwhelming support from residents of the town of Somerset. They unanimously agreed that this was a good idea. In addition, we found that some Somerset residents currently use the area for walking their dogs usually, but we don't think that's going to be a huge issue with the disruption of our garden, because we're going to put up fencing, so that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, so for our current process and plans, in the last few weeks, we have finalized our SketchUp model, held communications with the town manager, began ordering and preparing materials, developed educational resources, reviewed survey responses, and gained approval for site usage.
Our future plans for the carbon garden is getting our soil test done and adding any necessary amendments, obtaining volunteers to help with the garden work. It is 1,500 square feet approximately, and that's more work than just what Alex and I are capable of doing. And then prepping, cleaning up the garden, and then actually planting the garden along with our compost mix and mulch, then adding the necessary additions like walkways, rain barrels, fencing, and creating that maintenance workshop so it can be kept well in the future.
So here's a look at our measures of success and some of the metrics we've been tracking. So for our measures of success, we've had constructing the garden, defining carbon garden, developing a 2D model of the site, releasing and creating a survey for Somerset residents to kind of engage with them and get their thoughts on the garden, completing interviews with experts, getting permission for construction, completing educational aspects and educational signs, and having local volunteers help construct the garden. And kind of how we're tracking this is looking at the number of plantings for one, the number of surveys answered, and the number of volunteers that will help for construction.
So these are the people we interviewed to gain all the wonderful information that we got. So there's Ed Hewling, who helped a lot with the soil science and the microbial stuff that I talked about in the beginning. Dr. Sarah Villa, who really helped us wrap our heads around carbon sequestration. And Laura Miller, who is an arborist and helped us a lot with site and plant selection. So they were all very helpful.
And so these were our contacts and partners. They included Matthew Trollinger, who is the Somerset town manager. We've had a lot of communication with him and trying to get approval for the site, and he's been extremely helpful with that. And this all started with Barton Rubenstein, actually, who's the Somerset Environmental Committee chair. He recommended this space for us to look into using. So he's kind of started this whole thing off for us. Bethesda Green, the compost crew, and our interviewees. So we'd like to give a big thank you to all of our members at Bethesda Green, especially Kim, Jordan, and Emily. Thank you to Somerset Town Hall for helping us with selecting a site and getting it approved. Our interviewees who've been providing us with invaluable information that we couldn't have gotten this project done without, and Chesapeake Bay Trust.
Thank you. Questions for Alex and Andrew? The last presentation of the day. And I'd like to thank Alex for persevering through COVID during our presentation. All right, first question. So it's a great and highly technical presentation. Well done. There's a lot of talk in climate advocacy circles about carbon sequestration. How do you think we could replicate your sequestration garden throughout the county?
Well,
Well,
go ahead, Andrew.
all right. Well, Alex talked about all those wonderful techniques that we are using in the garden, such as no-till gardening, adding compost, mulch, biosolids, and these techniques are all wonderful for carbon sequestration. And if people are able to do that in their backyards, or if the county is able to replicate it in spaces that are free, then we can really sequester more carbon in our county.
Yeah, and just to add on, you can also use this in agriculture. I know Maryland has a lot of agriculture, and it's become increasingly popular over the years to kind of start using some of the techniques that Andrew and I have discussed.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any other comments, questions about the carbon garden? If anybody wants to volunteer to help maintain the carbon garden, feel free to email us at Bethesda Green, especially me, Kim at BethesdaGreen.org. And we can certainly introduce you to Alex and Andrew, who are putting together a volunteer list for folks to help install and help to maintain the garden in the future. And I wanted to thank our sponsors again, Chesapeake Bay Trust and Spring Power and Gas. I want to thank everybody for joining us late on a Friday evening. And hopefully we will see you again next year, and have a wonderful evening, everybody. And congrats to all of our environmental leaders on their fantastic presentations. We enjoyed having everybody. So thank you. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Talk to you soon.